This is the third tutorial in a series of tutorials covering Adobe Flash. This particular tutorial will be covering symbols. In Flash, symbols are used to keep the file size down, so it's kind of critical in Flash that you try to keep your file size as small as possible. So what symbols allow you to do is they allow you to make something once and then to use it repeated times. Within the language of Flash, Flash refers to the repeated versions of a symbol as instances. So we're going to be making a symbol today just of a character's head, and then we're going to make another symbol of the character's eye and insert that into the character's head. So to begin that process, the first thing that you need to understand is the special palette in Flash that's called the library. So the library is where different assets. So just in terms of the shortcuts that you should commit to memory, you should add Command L, which will basically open and close the library. So Command L closes the library. If I hit Command L again, it will open the library. Now we don't have anything in the library yet, but we're going to start by making a symbol. There are three different types of symbols you can make. You can make a graphic symbol, you can make a button symbol, and you can make a movie clip symbol. Today we're going to be covering graphic symbols and movie clip symbols, but we're going to leave button symbols to another tutorial. Graphic symbols and movie clip symbols initially will look very similar to you, but there's a critical difference between the two. Graphic symbols should be used for something that you want to make a copy of because it will decrease your file size. So let's say, for example, you're making an animation of a tree and you want to have leaves that are falling off the tree. Well, if you make all of those leaves individually, the file size will be much larger than if you made one leaf, identified it as a symbol, then put instances of that symbol on the stage. The use of symbols not only decreases file size, but it also increases the speed that your final animation will load, especially if you're streaming it online. The second type of symbol that we're going to go over today is the movie clip symbol. The movie clip symbol is different than the graphic symbol in that it's used for a piece of animation that you want to repeat. So let's go back to our example of a tree with leaves. If I was making a tree with falling leaves, then instead of making that leaf as a graphic symbol, I'd want to make it as a movie clip symbol so that I could embed the falling part into the symbol. Now this will make more sense as we go through it. So I'm going to start off by making a new symbol. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. The easiest way is just to go up to your Insert menu and go to New Symbol. Now just take note that the shortcut for that is Command F8. And when I do that, it's going to open the new symbol dialog box, and you're going to be able to name the symbol. And I'm going to call this symbol head, because we're going to draw a character's head. And I'm going to identify this symbol as a movie clip, because we are going to want to animate this. Now if I wasn't going to animate this, let's say this was just going to be a background that was going to be stationary, then I might identify that as a graphic symbol. And again, we're not going to cover buttons today, but buttons are symbols that allow you to introduce activity in your animation. So identify this as a movie clip, and let's go ahead and hit OK. Now that takes us into symbol editing mode. I wish that there were more extreme visual cues to let you know that you're in symbol editing mode, because it looks very similar to the main stage. The main thing to take note of is this X that's in the center of your stage. So that X is letting you know that that's the center of the symbol. The other thing to make note of is that if you look up here where it identifies the scene, we now have a little extra category in the hierarchy that says head, and it's got this little blue symbol that has a gear on it, which is the visual identifier for a movie clip symbol. Also, even though we haven't drawn anything yet, if you come over here in the library, you'll see that I now have an item in the library called head. So let's just go ahead and get the drawing tools, and I'm going to just draw some simple kind of character's head. And just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm not going to get too fancy about this. I'll just kind of, well, let's fill that. I'm going to get the paint bucket and we'll just fill that in. And let me switch colors. Maybe I'll switch to a dark color and a little smaller. So if you remember the last tutorial, we went over the brush tool. So I can switch to a little bit smaller brush here. And let's give him mouth. Now I'm not going to give him eyes because we're going to make the eyes in a different way. But let's give him some spiky hair. Okay, so I could get more detailed than that, but that will be enough to demonstrate the point. So it's not too fabulous as a drawing, but it can, be simple in order to demonstrate the idea of a symbol. So basically, if you want to go back to your main work area, you can go back to the main work area by coming up here in the hierarchy and clicking on the scene. So I only have one scene in this case. So I'm going to click on scene 1, and that's going to take me back into my main work area where I don't have anything yet. So we're going to make a few things before we get started. I'm going to go ahead and make another symbol, and I'm going to make some kind of simple background. So again, I'm going to go back up to the Insert menu. I'm going to go back to New Symbol, and this time I'm going to identify the symbol as a graphic symbol, and I'm just going to call it background. And let's hit OK. That takes me back into the symbol editing mode. And notice in my library I have two symbols now. This symbol is marked with a different icon. The symbol for a graphic symbol is this little square with these geometric shapes in it. So that's letting me know without even opening anything, if I just look in the library, I can tell that background is a graphic symbol and head is a movie clip symbol. So again, we're in the editing mode for the movie clip symbol background. I'm sorry, for the graphic symbol background. Again, you're going to have a center crosshair to tell you where the center of the symbol is. And it's kind of important to draw your symbol. It's not absolutely critical, but you want to kind of center your symbol on that crosshair. If you look up here in the top left-hand corner of our work area, you can tell again by this hierarchy that I'm in scene 1, but I'm not in the main editing area for scene 1. I'm in the symbol background, and I'm in the symbols editing area. And so now I'm just going to edit a simple background. So let's just say, let's get kind of maybe a grayish color, and I'm going to use the rectangle drawing tool, just kind of make a foreground. And maybe our character is outside, so I'm going to turn the stroke off, and I'm going to get maybe a greenish color, and I'll just quickly use the circle tool to make some objects that kind of look like foliage. And then I'll just put some details with a darker color, say darker green. And let me get a darker gray, and kind of put some texture lines. This isn't really necessary, just me kind of complicating things. And then maybe there's a blue sky in the background. I haven't talked about layers yet, but I'm going to put this in a separate layer so that I can put it behind these green bushes, and we'll come back in another tutorial and we'll talk about layers in greater detail. I'm going to go ahead and just use the rectangle tool. Just briefly, layers allow you to organize information. So we could do something like that. It's a little dark. Let's pick a little bit brighter blue. Ooh, too bright. Something in between. Okay, I may have gone back to the original blue. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's going to be our background. So again, I haven't edited anything on the main stage yet. I've only been editing in the symbols. So you can kind of think of that as preparation. But over in my library, I can now look at my different symbols. So you'll get a little preview. And if the symbol had animation, we could preview the animation. This particular symbol has no animation. I can go to head, and I can look at that symbol, right? So you can quickly visually determine which symbols you want to work with, and that's in case you didn't label things well. Now you can always rename things. Like I put a space in between back and ground. That looks a little weird to me. So you could double click right on the name of the symbol, and you could edit the name of that. I'm just going to take that space out, and so you could rename that symbol. Now in order to use the symbol, you basically just drag it out of the library. And you can use as many instances of that symbol as you want. So I'm just going to use one instance of the symbol in this case. But we'll go and make another symbol in a second, and I'll use multiple instances of that symbol. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this out and put it on the stage. Now, one of the problems with using symbols, especially when you're using them as backgrounds, is that they have the potential to cover the entire stage, so you won't be able to know where your stage boundaries are. And so one of the things that I always like to do is let me go to my layers and turn off that layer's eyeball for a second, which will turn off its visibility. I like to go to my rulers. So if you go to your view menu and you go down to rulers, you can open up rulers. And from your rulers, you can click with your mouse and drag, and that will let you drag out guides. And so if you do that twice for each vertical edge, and then from the top ruler, twice for the two horizontal edges, you can mark the edges of your stage. So if I turn the layer back on to turn that background image back on, you can see that now I can still see where my stage is. So whatever is inside this box will be seen on the stage, and what's outside of these light blue lines won't be seen in the final animation because it's not in the stage, it's in the wings of the stage. I'm going to go ahead and go to this layer and double click where it says layer 1, and that will let me rename this, and I'm just going to call it BG for background. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer by clicking this little new layer button. And that's going to create a second layer, and I'm going to call that clouds. And we're going to go and we're going to create a cloud symbol to put in the sky. So let's go back and select the background layer, and then select the background object. And I'm going to transform this a little bit so that it's a little bit too big, so I'm going to scale it down. The third tool in your toolbar is your transform tool. And similar to when you're transforming in Photoshop, you can hold Shift and scale from one of the corners, and that will scale your object proportionately so you don't stretch the proportions of the image. Now if you want to stretch the proportions of the image, you can always drag just one of the side handles, right, and it would stretch it longer, but that's going to distort your symbol in this case. I don't mind really though, because this is shrubbery and sky, so who's going to know? So I'm just going to scale that down a little bit in our work area. Now I want that to exist for the entire animation, and so I'm going to go ahead and come down into my layers on my timeline, and I'm going to go down to say the 60th frame, and I'm going to select that by clicking it. It should become highlighted blue.